Good morning, Boker Tov. Welcome back to 10 minutes of meaning. Please help yourself to coffee, sloshes, pastries in our Reb Shaila corner. I want to express our gratitude to 10 minutes of meaning, generously sponsored by our dear friends Marilyn and Michael Fidak. Thank you so much for your generosity in this and so much more. We are learning together, not teaching, but learning together. Sefer Tanya, and we are middle of second parak, parak Beis. The first parak spoke about the first soul, the lowliest soul we have, the Nefesh Bahami, the animal soul. A soul that we're not trying to slaughter or purge the animal in us, but train and elevate and empower and enrich and take the animal impulse, the animal instinct, our nature, the five senses, the way in which we experience the world physically, and to have it serve the higher soul, which is the beginning of the second parak. The second parak deals with that we are all a chelek elokah mimo mamish, we're each a piece of God. And so when searching for God, evidence, proof, of feeling of Hashem's existence, we don't have to look everywhere outside of ourselves. All we have to do is look within ourselves, because where Hashem can be found most poignantly, most profoundly, most potently is in the mirror, is within our very self. So we left off, and the Tanya was describing that the truth is that all souls to a certain degree are equal, an element of the soul, all souls are equal, and that we all emanate, we all come from Hashem himself. As the metaphor of the child is born from the seed of the father. And again, in antiquity, they thought that the seed began in the brain, and from the brain descended down the spinal cord, and from there, the insemination, the child was formed. And we sort of, Steinsaltz said that's connected to the pituitary gland. Other ways of interpreting the decision for conception begins in the brain and filters down. But for our purposes, the Baal Tanya now talks about that original seed of that conceives, begins life, has within it all of the potential within the person. So it begins as one cell and splits several times. In that one cell ultimately is the person's brain and the person's toenails. Every part of the person, from the head to the toe, from the kepala to the fitzalach, every part of the person is incorporated and programmed and designed and contained within that original spark, within that original seed. Even ultimately, the toenails are formed from the very same drop that the child's higher faculties, that their brain, that their intellect comes from through a 9-month gestation in the mother. And that drop ultimately progresses downward, is transformed, evolves, so that the same thing that ultimately expresses itself in the brain is the source of the toenail. They both come from the same place. Even in the nail, the drop is only changed in the form, but the inner identity, the source, the origin, is the same as the brain. So even the child's body itself, all the organs are nourished by the brain. So now we can understand. In the child, the nails draw their spiritual nourishment and energy from the brain in the child's head. So what's this metaphor? What is the Baal Tanya getting at? He's first referencing two sources for the relationship between what the father contributes, what's contained in that original drop of seed, how it evolves and develops and manifests in the different parts of that child. The Gemara Nida Daf Lamed Aleph tells us that the seed of the father, the white, the loven, form the tendons, the bones, and the nails. And this connects, not for now, to the secret of Adam's clothing in the Garden of Eden, in Gan Eden, that according to the Medrash, his body was like a body armor made with nails, and this connects to that. And I say not for now to impress you, as if I could explain it. I just don't have time now. But the truth is that's a cover for the fact that I can't explain it anytime, not only not now. But we'll stick with the not for now. So now that we depicted in detail the lowliest part of that child, right? So a husband and a wife conceive, and the husband contributes his seed. And in that moment that he contributes that seed, begins a process of conception, gestation, and what will come out will be a healthy baby. And what the father contributed will not only be in the baby's brain, intellect, cognitive capacity, but the baby's toenail, the baby's toes, the lowliest part, so to say, of the baby is also finds its origin in that original contribution of that original seed. So It all connects back to the brain of the Father. V'kacha mamash kiviyachol. And mirroring this precisely, kiviyachol. And here the Baal Tanya uses the word kiviyachol. I saw someone shared with me this week, the Rebbe was reviewing a write-up of one of his talks where he spoke about we comfort, we console Hashem. And he wrote in the margin the word kiviyachol. The Rebbe was insistent that whenever we depict an emotion, a feeling, a description of Hashem, it's important, like the Baal Tanya, to use the word kiviyachol. What does the word kiviyachol mean? Figuratively. Don't project human experience, human body on the Ribono Shel Olam. Kiviyachol. It's a vocabulary that we can use to relate, to identify, to understand, because that's our experience. But of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is categorically different. So when we ascribe it to him in anthropomorphism, we have to use the word kiviyachol, figuratively, kiviyachol. The Rebbe insisted, here the Baal Tanya too, kacha mamish, kiviyachol. The metaphor is perfect and exact, figuratively. The metaphor is perfect and exact as a metaphor, kiviyachol. B'shorosh kol hanefesh, in the root of everybody, ruach u'neshama shel klal Yisrael amala, is the supernal root of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of all of Klal Yisrael. B'yirida, so b'madrega l'madrega, al yedei hishtalshelus ha'olamas atzilus bria yitzira v'asiya, mechachmaso yisbarach. As they descend rung by rung from Hashem's wisdom, in other words, here in the metaphor, kiviyachol, Hashem is the Father. From his brain descended the seed that's going to inseminate the world with us, his children. And it happens, this development, this insemination, this seeding the world through the chain of four spiritual worlds, which are called Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. We'll get more into. K'dechsiv kulam b'chachma asisa. As the pasuk says in Tehillim Kuf Daled, kulam b'chachma asisa, you made them all with wisdom. It all comes from your brain, Hashem. So we, let me summarize. We, you and I, all of us, every yid, is an expression, a unique and distinct manifestation, expression of Hashem in this world. From where? His brain. Because again, the Baal Tanya invoked the Rambam, that Hashem is wisdom and intellect. The Maharal disagreed and said that's not all Hashem is. He's more than that. But the Baal Tanya, at least in this context, quoted the Rambam. So from Hashem's brain, intelligence, truth, wisdom, he inseminates the world, namely in us. And even the lowly, even the pathetic, even the insignificant, even the temporary and temporal us are expression and manifestation of that brain of Hashem. Chaim Miller, in his commentary here, has a thought. Why do I feel such a wondrous and powerful unity with my own biological child? Because that child came from me. It's an essential expression of who I am. In the same sense, I'm a child of Hashem, since my soul is derived one way or another from his supernal wisdom, which is an essential expression of who he is. So the love that we have for our children, not only because of the sacrifice and the effort and the selflessness that we give to our children, but because the child is an expression of us, contains our very DNA, is an extension, an expression of us. We, kiviyachol, are an expression, are an extension of Hashem, and the same unconditional love we have for a child as an extension and expression of ourselves, so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu has that boundless, endless, unconditional love for us as an extension, an expression of him through his supernal wisdom. So then the Baal Tanya continues. Now that he's given this metaphor, just like the seed that begins in the father's brain descends, comes, inseminates, and then the child, from the child's brain all the way down to the child's toenail, all are an expression of fulfillment, the manifestation of that original seed that came from the brain. We are all from Hashem's brain that descended and emanated through those four worlds and developed, and through his own constriction expresses itself in us. And the result of this spiritual downgrade, this evolution through the four worlds, is that from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from his divine wisdom, from his brain, came Nefesh Ruach Neshama, the Nefesh Ruach Neshama of Amei Haaretz. And Am Haaretz is not meant here to be a disparaging, not meant to be judgmental. It's a description of common folk. It means that you don't have to be the biggest Greisa Talmid Chacham, you don't have to be the most righteous, you don't have to be the biggest tzaddik, you don't have to be in the Motzei Gedolei Torah. It means the Amei Haaretz. It means the common folk, the average man. That the through simple people and common folk. But nevertheless, like a biological child, those souls still remain bound with the wondrous and awesome unity, with our original essential source, with the original seed that began it all. Shehi hamshachas chachma ila'a. So just like if you were to see someone's toe or toenail, you would say, ugh. You probably would say, ugh, a toenail. Is that the expression of a person? I'd like to introduce myself. This is my toenail. This says everything about who I am. I don't know, maybe some people paint their toenails and put jewelry on the toes, but the average toenail is not the best. They're not putting their best foot forward, pun intended. But the toenail is the lowest, most base expression of who a person is. That's compared to the Am Haaretz, the lowliest, most base, most uneducated, most ignorant, most simple person is also coming from, just like the toenail comes from the same place that created my brain, also developed, evolved, descended into expressing itself in my toenail. My brain and my toenail come from the same place. Even the brain is a much, much, much more sophisticated expression of that original spark and seed than the toenail, but they came from the same place. So even the Am Haaretz, the common folk, the every man, every yid, all of us are direct emanation of the Chachma Ilah, of the supernal wisdom of Hashem. They come from His brain, the sophisticated, advanced brain of Klal Yisrael, and the lowliest toenail of Klal Yisrael have at their core everything in common in coming from the same place, that original spark, that original seed. Which leads us now to the third part of the second parak, which is the end of the second parak. The third part took us from, the first parak was the Nefesh Bahami, the animal soul. The beginning of the second parak was that we have what he calls the Nefesh Hashenis, the second. And we talked about why is it called the second. The Chelek Elokah Mima'al, that we're all made from Mamish, literally. That is not Kiviyachol. Interestingly, that's not Kiviyachol. That's not a metaphor. That's not figurative. There the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, says the word Mamish. We are Chelek Elokah Mima'al Mamish. Not metaphorically, not using it as some drasha, not saying it hypothetically, but literally, Mamish. We're Chelek Elokah Mima'al Mamish. And then he unpacks that. What does that mean? That all of us are a piece of God? It means from Hashem's brain, His supernal wisdom, Kiviyachol, He seeded all of the Jewish people. And whether we, a particular Jew, is a toenail or the brain, we all come from the same spark, supernal wisdom, the same source, and we all have the same origin, namely our Father, Hashem. Now the third part, the Baal Tanya moves to the notion of the leader, the tzaddik, because the tzaddik is not the toenail. The tzaddik is the brain of the child. So that child has a brain, liver, lungs, kidneys, and toenails. Who in Klal Yisrael are the brain, and who's the toenail? The toenail can say to the brain, whoa, relax, we both come from the same seed. True. But the brain can say, that may be true, but the brain is more sophisticated, more advanced, contributes more than the toenail. So the Baal Tanya then moves to the role and the goal of the tzaddik. Ki yinikas hachayis, we'll end with this. Yinikas v'chayis nefesh ruach neshama shel amei haaretz, hu mi nefesh ruach neshama shel tzaddikim v'achachamim. The nefesh ruach and neshama of the average person, the simple people, are nurtured and energized from the nefesh ruach and neshama of the tzaddikim and the scholars, bnei Rashi bnei Yisrael shebedoram, the heads of the Jewish people in their generation, which is a pasuk in Bamidbar Perek Yud Gimel. Rashi bnei Yisrael shebedoram. So, in other words, what dictates to wiggle the toe? What is determining for the toenail to grow? What decides when it's time to cut the toenail? Or in particular cases, certainly not mine, get a pedicure for the toenail? What decides all that? The brain. So yes, the toenail says, I come from the same place as you, the brain, but the brain is what dictates for the toenail, determines for the toenail, is what decides for the toenail. So we too, the Amei Haaretz, we may be able to proudly say, find our source in the seed, the supernal wisdom, the brain of our shared Father Hashem, but we are nurtured and energized from you, the tzaddikim of the generation, who are the brain of the generation. So the idea of the soul connection between spiritual master and disciple becomes a center focus of Hasidus and of Chabad in particular. And we'll pick up with next week. My friend Rabbi Volvovsky was explaining to me that the Chabad, about Tanya's understanding of the role of the tzaddik, the doctrine, what scholars who like to study this call the doctrine of the righteous. The doctrine of the tzaddik is different than other Hasidus, the role. So for example, apparently, on a Yurtzeit, Chabad says Tachanun. Other Hasidus, Dafka, Yidavid and many Nusach Sfard Binyanim, they don't say Tachanun ever. It's always somebody's Yurtzeit. And a Yurtzeit is a reason to omit Tachanun. Chabad Dafka say Tachanun on a Yurtzeit, which is reflective of a fundamental difference in understanding the role of the tzaddik. And Amir Hashem will pick up with this. Next time, the third part of the second parak of Tanya. May it be a day of Yeshuos v'nechamos besoros tovos for Klal Yisrael.